Organized crime. Now, there's a story here, Joey, right?
Yes.
The Gambinis around, as I recall, and tell me if I'm missing anything.
We're getting a little up there in years, but you always have a pretty good memory, so shoot.
Thank you. And that's what we have multiple takes for as well, and editing. But anyhow, so there was the protection business, right? And for our friends and associates that likes to have a small rooting interest in the game, we took their bets. For the things like garbage pickup and that sort of thing, we had our cut, but it was to make sure it all worked smoothly. The longshoremen, the unions, we had our.
Everybody got a piece.
We had a piece of it, but it was to make it work smoothly. I mean, it's like, what do they call Chicago? The city that works. Well, but every big city works better when things are organized. I'm talking about the legalized stuff.
What do you want? Disorganized? I mean, what's the other option?
No,
Of course, that's better.
Yeah, that's right. And anyway, so the Paulie, I think it was Gambini, back around the early 1920s, was looking at the whole thing, and he said, he's looking at the books from the accountant, and he said, all right, things are going great. Things are really going great. However, I think there's an opportunity for us to expand our business, go into a new line of business, which has not been considered to that point, and that was, believe it or not,
Chickens.
and eggs.
Egg production.
Yes.
Egg production.
Now,
Doesn't
you
have
may not,
anything to
you've
do-
never heard this, but sometimes you learn something from watching the Joey and Mickey Pro Football Show, and this is one of those times.
Sometimes you just do,
You do.
whether you want to or not.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, the concept here was eggs are profitable. Everybody eats eggs. People eat eggs for breakfast. People sometimes eat eggs for lunch, sometimes for dinner, but certainly it's a staple of the American breakfast. And chicken, people eat chicken all the time. Chicken breast, chicken parmesan, chicken cacciatore,
Yeah.
anything.
Chicken nuggets.
So, chicken nuggets,
Yeah.
even before McDonald's.
Yeah.
Um,
Feather down pillow.
That's right.
They don't use chicken feathers, though, do
No, it's goose.
they? Yeah.
Close enough. But if you can't afford goose down, you can make a pillow out of chicken feathers, and nobody's going to notice the difference. You'll still get a good night's
That's
sleep.
another show for another time.
Yeah, all right.
'Cause I want to see this made.
Let's make
I don't know about them, but I want to see what's being made.
We'll have a demonstration. We'll have a video. Anyhow, so Paulie Gambini figured America is already into chickens, and we, providing services and products to Americans, should get into chickens too. So he bought, I think it was like 100,000 chickens, and rented some warehouse
It was
space.
a large number because I saw chicken trucks for at least a week every morning coming to the headquarters.
I
Remember
know.
that? There were
Yeah.
feathers on top of feathers. Sometimes I didn't know if I was standing next to a chute or if I was still standing next to you.
So anyway, it was air conditioned. They were trying to provide all the comforts of home for the chickens, and they had room for their feed. They had room to lay their eggs. they got to run around a little bit. They let them all out, which was an amazingly chaotic experience. And so began the chicken. The chicken. It's been called a racket. It was not a racket. It was a business. It was a business like other businesses.
Again, nasty word.
Well, yeah, I know, it's a pejorative. Don't believe it. So, thus, the family entered the chicken business and the egg business. Things were going along swimmingly. And then one day, of course, the accountant kept tabs on all the chicken production, the egg production, net sales, gross profits, net profits, whatever, all the expenses and everything. And things were great. I mean, chickens are basically easy creatures to raise. What can I say? We brought in a number of farmers from all over. They were in the Midwest mostly, extending to Nebraska, Michigan, and so on, Kentucky. And
I remember it well.
We had the best chicken consultants available in the United States, best chicken consultants that money could buy, which was a brilliant investment, and things were going great. But then what was it, Joey? There's something that seemed to be missing, or seemed to be going wrong one day.
Well, I'll say this before I get into that. Even Papa Gambini was known for saying often, "No two chickens are the same."
That's true.
Yeah, and
Darn
what
similar.
ended up happening was he had one of his regular meetings where he talked about organized crime. If those of you don't know, you have your CEO, so to speak. You had Papa Gambini, who had a weekly meeting, and he brought in his capos. Those are captains, okay? And and he said to Captain Number One, who was well, we're not going to say his name, but
No.
we'll call him Captain Number One.
Okay.
And he said, Captain Number One, how did we look this week in racketeering? And Captain Number One said, we were up 20 G's. Okay. He saved his neck this week. Captain Number Two, Capo Number Two, prostitution. It was a little rough.
Another pejorative.
It was a little rough. Okay, you know what? I even slipped.
That's right.
I'm sure there was a couple of times that he said, showing the love. How do we look this week?
There you go.
And he said, and the captain said, well, you know, Capo Number Two said, well, Mr. Gambini, you know, these cops came around and they said the girls had too much makeup on, and then they got suspicious, and I just said the girls like to wear a lot of makeup, and they didn't buy my story. And so I really couldn't circulate, so to speak. I had eyes on me all week long, so we were a little bit down. And he went down the list of all the different, as you said, all the different parts of the business that we were in. And then finally, he got to chicken and egg production.
Yes.
And that captain said, we're in trouble. He said, what are you talking about, we're in trouble? Vinny, the chickens lay eggs. You feed the chickens sit there, they lay eggs, we sell the eggs, we make money. What part of that A to B exchange are you having trouble with? He said, well, they're retaliating. They're striking.
The chickens were striking. This is what he's saying. The chickens were striking.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
And
But true.
So, as you can imagine, Papa Gambini was like, you want me to come over there and string your neck or have it done? You know I can do that. And he's like, no, I'm serious. You know, I don't know how you want me to, I don't know what you want me to tell you, but there's nothing else I can say, but they're not laying eggs like they have been doing for the last year. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, we're down about 30% production. And he goes, well, you're the one I put in charge. You're out there at least a couple of times a day, making sure nobody's trying to break in, making sure they get fed on their intervals. You're the one I've put in charge of this. He goes, Papa Gambini, I swear, I was just in there the other day. I was dropping off some feed. I saw 16 of them in a little corner, and they had their feathers all going, and they were working out some signals or a play or something. But I knew there was some thinking going on, and there was some mathematics going on, and there was some figuring going on, and one of them looked at me and winked. I swear, he looked at me and he winked, and I don't want no chickens winking at me.
Exactly.
Now you could put me in any of the other captain's businesses, and I promise you I'll be profitable, and I'll bring in my gross and salary and revenue that I'm supposed to bring in, but don't make me go back in there with those chickens.
Terrifying. I mean, it's totally unexpected. Who would have thunk that these animals are basically, these are farm animals, and who would think that they would even have the thought of, how did they even hear about organizing? Whoever heard of the chickens organizing? They wanted to start a union. They wanted better working conditions. They wanted more food. They wanted better food. They wanted more variety. They wanted some worms once in a while instead of the same old chicken feed.
I remember
That's where the expression chicken feed came from, because the chickens were objecting, and they said, "You're just giving us the same old stuff. It's chicken feed." They said, "Come on, why don't you treat us with some dignity? It's bad enough you're going to take our eggs and then slaughter us when we're in the prime of our lives. You should at least treat us nicely."
This is not shrimp.
It's an outrage.
This is not steak once a week. Chicken feed is chicken feed.
That's
That's
right.
all you're feeding us.
Well, so I think, not to sound too much like an animal lover, but I think they had a point. You know, they had some merit to their argument. But nevertheless, it was bad for business when they started cutting down egg production, and then they made their demands, didn't they?
They did, and
They
they laid out everything that you said.
Yeah, no pun intended.
And so here was Captain. Here was the captain of that division of the family business who had sweating bullets. He had to go in front of Papa Gambini the next week, and he said, they have a list of demands. Who has a list of demands? He said, well, the Board of Chickens.
The Board of Chickens, can you believe it? They had already formed a board by then.
They had if you can imagine, you walked into the chicken coop and you had 50,000 chickens on this side of the coop, and you had 50,000 chickens on that side of the coop. And there was a small ledge where we used to keep the feed. Well, somehow they were able to knock off the bags of feed, and there were 6 chickens that they roosted their little selves literally on the top, and they were the board of chickens.
Yeah.
And they gave their list of demands, and immediately, I remember this because I followed him out there, but the capo for the chickens, Papa Gambini, said, "This is, you know what, I'm tired of hearing about this. I want you to go out there and I want you to ruffle some feathers." Literally.
And that's where that expression came from.
It was!
They tried to rough up the chickens as they thought, I don't know, they figured it would be easy.
Well, we muscle, that's what we do, right?
I know. Only when we
New
have
Jersey?
to. We only do that when verbal persuasion doesn't really work. So,
You gotta have somewhere to go.
yeah.
So literally the capo went out there, and before I tell this quick little what he did, Mickey, how do you threaten a chicken?
Yeah. Well, it's tough. It's like you got to have the psychological edge, and it's tough. You know, first of all, we those of us in our neighborhood and our family and everything, we've got decades of experience dealing with people. We know how to deal with people. We understand psychology. We understand human emotions and behavior, and basically, you make them an offer they can't refuse. But you got to use the carrot.
It's called motivation.
Yeah, you got to use the carrot and the stick. Well, we had no experience, and nor did this. The capo had no experience negotiating with chickens, persuading chickens, especially organized chickens. So he was really learning from scratch, and that's where that expression comes from. He had to make it all up. He just had to try something, and if it didn't work, he had to try something else. So
This is the greatest relevant untold story in the history of not only American business, but American poultry and that industry. So I remember, I can't say his name, but I remember, we'll just call him FS. He's literally out there holding a .357 revolver in front of one of the board of chickens. And Papa Gambini comes out and he says, "That's enough." And he said, "I want all 100,000 of you chickens to listen to me and listen to me good. Everybody in my family produces. I don't care who you are. You could be my first nephew, Nicky. You could be my second nephew, Nicky. Not that I love one more than the other. You could be my third nephew, Nicky. But everybody that's part of this family will produce. I have given you a job. I want to see the money come in." Which he said, "Show me the money." And that's where that expression came from.
that's right.
And they stole it. They used it again in Jerry Maguire. So there were four strong, get to the point, New Jersey, New York acting sayings that came out of the 1923 chicken strike. And from that day forward, they were scared of Papa Gambini.
Right.
They were popping out eggs all over the place.
That's right.